What's happening, everyone? Welcome to another edition of In the Studio with Spicy G. Today we're going to be talking about setting up your pop production template. Here we go. Spicy G! So why do you need a great template? A template's important because it speeds up your workflow considerably. So what you're using a template for is to have it automatically load up plugins, effects, things that you normally use through the majority of your sessions. It opens up immediately. This way you don't have to spend time during the session trying to load all those things in. Now granted, each one of these things may take 15 to 30 seconds, but after a while it starts to add up. And the best part about the template is it maximizes your time, especially when you have limited time to work with an artist or a songwriter. You need to get as much done as you can, as quickly as possible, and as efficiently as possible. This is why you need a good template. In this particular video, I'm going to be using Logic Pro, which is what I use to create music, but this is certainly applicable to Pro Tools, Cubase, Ableton, any of the DAWs. The important part here is to set up a working template for you to get started fast. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set up an average tempo and an average time signature. These are the things that you are normally going to encounter when you start a project. So at the top over here, my BPM, beats per minute, is set at 100. And right next to it, you can see that the time signature is set to 4/4. The majority of my projects are definitely in 4/4. And I would say that a lot of my projects tend to go anywhere from 92 to 110. So I just kind of put the average tempo in there. The next thing you're going to want to set is the average quantization for recording. So if you take a look over here in the top left of my screen, you can see that I have my quantization set at a 16th note, which means when I hit the record button, anytime I record any software instrument like keyboard or synth or whatever, it's going to automatically quantize to a 16th note. Now, some of you may not want to do that, but on average, I am quantizing to 16th note. I can always just, after the fact, just click on the region and then unquantize it to put it back to the original way I played it in. But especially in pop music, where you are lining up to the grid a lot of the time, I leave it at a 16th note. Now we're going to want to set some basic arrangement markers. And you can see on my screen, I have verse over here, verse 1 in green, and I have it the length of 8 bars, which is pretty typical for most songs. And I didn't put the pre or chorus afterwards because it changes all the time. And so that I just put the first marker here and just left the other one blank. You can access this menu if you are in Logic just from this global menu button over here. And you can see right under it, there's also a time signature thing that shows the time signature and the key signature if you are in the global menu. Now you're going to want to set some basic recording functions. For example, you can see here on the screen, I have the metronome pulled up, which is in the project settings window, which you can access by coming up over here if you are in Logic, over to File, Project Settings, and going to General. And you'll see these tabs at the top here. If you hit on metronome, you'll be able to get to the settings. This is important for when you're recording. So you can see I have ticked over here, click while recording, and only the polyphonic clicks. Sometimes I will use only during count-in. So for example, if I already have the basic track done and the vocalist is going to sing, they don't need the metronome most of the time if there's, because there'll already be a count-in. So then I just want them to feel the groove of the track. So then it will only just click during the count off and no click afterwards. And I also, if you hit the recording tab in Logic, you can set where the count, how many bars you want for a count in. So mine is set at 1 bar, but if you just click over here, you can set it for as many bars as possible. And this gives enough pre-roll so that the musician knows or the singer knows when to come in. At this point, you can see how my starting window looks. And this is going to be the next thing you're going to be setting up, which is how you want to view your screen when the template gets loaded up. So at the top here, I usually have my MIDI data at the top here, which is really where the quantization is at the top. Then I also have this, the track view, which is every time I click on a track, it will show me over here to the left, just the track that I'm on. I also, obviously this is my main area, which is the arrange window in Logic. And typically, at least in this particular template, I almost always have the Apple Loop browser open on my template. Now, I like this browser open because I can change it to any of the imported loops that I have. I'm able to view tons of my loops throughout my system and on my external hard drives. So I'm always bouncing back and forth between the Apple Loop browser and the Finder window browser, which is, if you hit F on your keyboard in Logic, it'll come up over here, and then I just hit my bookmarks because I already have all my samples bookmarked. Now it's time to start setting up some tracks in your template. And the first thing I recommend is that you set up roughly 5 to 10 tracks, just blank audio tracks for easy drag and drop sample additions. So you can see over here I have, right here, it looks like I have 15 on my template. So 1 through 15 are blank tracks with nothing on them at all. It's just really easy for me to come over here, grab something and dump it on. And in Logic, it will, if it's a blank track, it'll automatically just title it for you. But it makes it so much easier to just drag and drop samples into just a regular audio track. It's important to have the rhythm section set up as well, being that most of your projects are going to have rhythm sections in them. Even if you brought some rhythm section stuff into the blank audio tracks, I still like to have some software synths or software instruments loaded up in my project automatically that are rhythm section based. So over here in my project, I have, it says kick and in parentheses AD, which is the addictive drums. So I load, this is always what comes up when I click on addictive drums. It starts with this particular kit. This is the regular studio house kit, but I really like it, so I always just leave it at that. When I come over here to my bass, I have Trillion loaded up, and generally I start it with this particular sound, which is a kind of a bigger synth sound that I use a lot. And then finally, usually for my piano, I use the East-West piano sound a lot of times, and I like the Steinway D, mostly because I'm doing, you know, acoustic-y projects, especially jazz-based. I like that Steinway sound. If you do a lot of guitar-based projects, I do have on my template a couple of guitar things down here. I have one power guitar track loaded up, one electric guitar if I'm going to use like for like lead lines and solos, and then an acoustic track loaded up as well. You can also see on my template that I have a keys track loaded up over here. There's nothing on that track because I juggle back and forth pretty frequently between whether I'm using electric piano or Rhodes or an organ sound, so I never really load up an actual instrument there, but I do like to have that on there as part of the rhythm section. Now it's time to set up our vocal tracks for both tracking and comping. So in this particular template, you can see here that I have my Vox Live, which is the track that I'm going to be recording my vocals to, and you can see that the auto-tune is already set on that particular track. I have an additional Vox track just in case I have an additional vocalist who's singing with us, and this is the tracks that I'm going to be using for comping. So after I record a track over here, I'm going to slide it down to this, which already has all of my plugins loaded in for my vocal chain. You can see that I have a bunch of vocal tracks just on my basic template. I have a center, like a vocal track that's in the center, one pan to the left, one pan to the right. I also have 3 different tracks set up for vocal harmonies as well. If I choose to double them later, I will just duplicate the track and then drag and drop that from whatever I do on the live. I bring it down to the tracks where I'm going to be comping. Next, you can customize your final track listing here as to things that you use quite often. And so you can see over here that I have a couple of string tracks that I use. This is from Miroslav and East-West. I also have loaded one instance of Omnisphere, one of Massive and Alchemy. These are things that I tend to use a lot. So I at least like to have one instance so that they're automatically kind of loaded up. And so when I start my project, they're already there so I don't have to waste time creating a new track, loading up the plugin. It's just already there. Finally, we need to get our mix window set up properly for our template. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is set up my inputs. So over here, if you take a look at my Vox track, you can see that I have the input over here set to input 2. Now, it can change, especially for those of you at home who have more than 2 inputs. I have just 2 inputs only, but many of you at home probably have anywhere from 1 to 4. So you can set it for whatever you normally use to plug a microphone in. I tend to use my vocals on 2, just like I tend to run my acoustic guitar through 1. It's just kind of a preference thing. You can always change it at any point in the session, but this is just typically what I set my session up for. The next thing we're going to do is set up our buses. So for the typical setup, most of you will be bussing your reverbs and delays, some of you compression. In my particular setup, I have a couple of different reverbs over here, Verb 1, and over here my Valhalla reverb, and I have one delay that I have set up. And you can see over here, I set the input, rather than setting the input to one of my inputs, I'm setting it to a bus. And in this particular case, I have it set to bus 1. Okay, and then I label at the bottom here what it is. If you're trying to create a new one from scratch, at least in Logic, they're called auxiliary channel strips. You'd come up here to option and create new auxiliary channel strips. And once you have these buses set, you can come up to a track. So right here in my Vox Live track, you can see I already have the bus set and it's already dialed in a little bit. I have almost all of it. If we take a look at these are my regular sample tracks, the 1 through 15 that have nothing on them because I don't know what I'm going to be using. But once we start getting over here to my synth-based tracks, you can see that my kick drum already has a compressor loaded on it. I have these buses loaded over here. This is for my one of my side chains. Piano has some reverb already bussed, and so on and so forth. So it's really, I like to get in the habit of just kind of having the buses on already prepared. You could, especially on my vocals, you can see right here that I already have 1, 2, and 4, and I already have some reverb, some delay, and just in case I want that 4th verb on there, which isn't even dialed in, I already have stuff kind of already ready to go. The final piece of the puzzle in creating our template is going to be to load some things up on the master bus. And over here, you can see on my stereo out over here, I have loaded 3 things, and these 3 things I think most people should have on their master. One is a nice multimeter and a goniometer. I know those sound all crazy, but the multimeter basically makes sure that you don't have your stuff panned all the way hard left or all the way hard right, so it's out of balance. So this just kind of makes sure that we are in balance and I'll be able to see it. I also have loaded up over here the SSL compressor by Waves. This is the solid state logic compressor. It's a great master bus compressor. And then finally, and this is not something that everyone does, but a lot of pop producers today do it, they have some sort of a limiter on the master. Normally you would just use the limiter in the mastering phase or maybe on an individual track, but I like to hear, I put a little bit of limiting on the master just so I can kind of hear where I'm at while I'm producing and mixing. All right, everyone, I hope you got a lot of information out of today's video. If you have any questions or you're interested in learning how to set up a template for more like film scoring or acoustic-based projects, you can click down in the info box and that will take you over to my video that shows that. Take care, everyone. Peace. Spicy cheese.